Hello and welcome, listeners. This is Michael Beach, and you are dialed into What Are You Doing podcast. This is the show for thought leaders who are investing in the next generation of leadership for their organization. This is also the show for you if you're an emerging leader who wants to become one of those great leaders. Our mission is to spread the message far and wide that the world needs leadership today more than ever. Let's work together to make it happen. We're excited to be able to bring you another What Are You Doing podcast episode today. I'm especially excited today to have the opportunity to introduce you to a special guest, my friend, Mike Petroskey, the Vice President of Sales at ArcSite, a Michigan company that has created a visual sales estimation and drawing tool that helps their customers win more bids and stand out when they're compared to their competitors. Mike, welcome. I'm so pleased to be able to have this conversation with you today.
It's an honor to be here.
I want to tell our audience a little bit about you before we discuss investing in business and leadership. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Listeners, Mike has spent more than 2 decades of his career in sales, and he's spent the most recent 5 years in leadership roles in high-growth technology startup companies. He's been a pivotal part of 2 successful company sales and most recently joined a Grand Rapids, Michigan-based SaaS startup where he has been charged with building a high-impact sales team. It's great to have you here with us today, Mike.
It's a complete honor to be here with you and the Michael Beach team.
Thank you very kindly. Mike, let's kick off the interview. I wanted to give you an opportunity to start out to put one of your products or services or your company, ArcSite, in our spotlight to start out our interview together. Is there anything going on at ArcSite that you'd like to tell our listeners about?
Yeah, absolutely. We're growing. So if
Wonderful.
you or anybody you know is interested in joining the world's fastest growing mobile CAD startup company, here we are. So we're, it's actually a kind of a funny story of how I got here because, you always want to hire people that you want to work for one day, right? And identify leaders and help them become leaders. So I had a rep on my team at my previous company that went over to ArcSite after the acquisition of that company. And, he reached out to me day one and was like, we've got something really special going on over here. I've got these things that I'm working on. Can you help me out? Can you coach me a little bit on what you see here with your perspective? And so I did. And for a few months, just kind of coached him through it. And I got to a point where I'd listened to too many calls. I'd seen too many demos. I'd learned too much about the company. That I said, give me your CEO. So I started a relationship with the CEO and did a little bit of consulting, and that eventually turned into the opportunity to join as the VP of sales. And that's where I'm at now.
Wow. What a great chain of events. That's really terrific. Well, I have no doubt that our audience would love to hear a little bit about some of the great books that you've discovered during your career. What's the best business or leadership book that you've read?
Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is one that comes to mind as one that I'm always flipping through and just finding nuggets of in each pass through. It used to be, maybe a decade, 2 decades ago, a little bit fluffy to think about emotions and emotional intelligence. But if you're not on your game nowadays and don't have an understanding of that, you're being left behind.
What an outstanding book. I love that you found that book so worthwhile. I certainly have as well. I've literally seen that book change the trajectory of some of my coaching clients' lives. It's that powerful. So, hey, listeners, if you've never read the book that Mike is talking about, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, it was written by Dr. Travis Bradberry and Gene Greaves, and you really owe it to yourself to get yourself a copy shipped to you today. Mike, my research before today's interview uncovered a bit of a mystery. I've been counseled to ask you about your spicy McChicken sandwich theory. Is that something you'd be willing to discuss with me and our listeners today? I got to admit, I'm just a bit intrigued.
Absolutely. When we're bringing folks onto the team at the business development level, a lot of the people on the team are coming from either college or from parallel industries, but don't necessarily have a foundation of sales. So I'm a big believer in little things count. And what Spicy McChicken sandwich theory is, the default mode, that having something on under the golden arches, having some picture behind there, having the person behind the counter say something, moves the needle one way or another. It's either you're selling more Spicy McChicken sandwiches or something else. The default mode matters. So when I'm talking about bringing people into the fold as far as how we're going to operationalize our sales team, there are all these little things you can do along the way that are going to make a bigger impact as that ball gets rolling. Now, each one outside of themselves isn't necessarily going to win or lose the deal or get or lose the meeting. But together, if you can think about all these elements and think about it as that customer coming in, what can we do to make sure that they are going to move in the right direction for what we are trying to get them to do? That's absolutely a way that I found to communicate the importance of the little things along the path to getting the right outcomes. And that's what sales is at the end of the day, is driving outcomes.
What a fascinating theory, Mike. Thanks for sharing that. I get the point, right? Little things count. And if we're going to do something a little bit outside of our comfort zone, little things, they're probably going to add up over time and have a positive impact. Very cool. Thank you for bringing us up to speed with your theory. Hey, as you've been developing over your career over those last 20 some years or so, did you have mentors who made a big investment in you or took an interest in helping you to become a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have that group of individuals. One, obviously being you. I remember being at Compellent in a lowly demand gen rep, and you took me under your wing. Just that experience of you taking the time, the COO of a global New York Stock Exchange company, to do that with me. That was a really special moment in my career. And I've had, been fortunate enough to have a handful of individuals who've also seen the same sort of potential in me that have bred me to be doing some of the things that I've been doing today, without which I'd have nothing. So, Chris Nordyke, who's a mutual acquaintance of ours.
Mm-hmm. Great
Gary
guy.
Zutter. Yep. Gary Zutter, who's in the CLM space, a fellow VP of sales, and Jim Winters up there in Minnesota.
Yeah. Great leaders for sure. That's quite a list of terrific leaders that you've come in contact with over the years. And you're right. I do know a couple of them personally, and I agree that they'd all be tremendous folks to learn from. Thanks for sharing that with us. I like to give a tip of the cap to the people who've helped us get where we are today. So I'm tipping my cap to you, Mr. Nordyke, Mr. Zutter, and Mr. Winters. Over the years, Mike, I have to imagine that you've worked to build some great teams and developed some strong teamwork and collaboration on those teams. Would you share with us how you've developed your teams over the years?
Yeah. So one is you start with the team. You start with the people that are doing the challenging work that you've hired them to do. And you start with making sure that everybody has a level of empathy and understanding on what the goal is and how we're all going to work together to get there, and that nobody's left behind. Good leadership is all about focusing on the team and making them the winners of the game. So fostering that culture that rewards collaboration and empathy beyond all else is one of the ways that I've done that. And empathy is, in my belief, one of the greatest skills you can have as a sales rep and as a leader. And right. I want to instill that in my team. I want them to really be focused their entire day about thinking from other people's frames of mind. Because unless you can do that and invoke some of that emotional intelligence we talked about earlier, you're going to eventually run into a wall because you're just thinking about yourself. My experience, trying to just foster that culture that it's great to win. It's okay to fail. But we're going to do that as a team.
Fantastic. It's kind of amazing to me doing what I do for a living. I run into so many companies that really don't focus enough on teamwork and collaboration. They worry more about individual contribution from their sales professionals than they do, becoming great teammates and great collaborators. Because in my experience, we win a lot more often when we win together, when we've got our teammates right there with us in the middle of the sales campaign, thinking of the things we forgot, point something that maybe we left out of our approach. Terrific take on the importance of empathy as well, Mike. I couldn't agree with you more. If you can't listen to the people that you're trying to support as you're trying to sell them products and services and solutions, you're not going to understand what they really want and need. And so you're going to be positioning the wrong solutions for them. So being able to put yourself in another person's shoes and walk around a little bit and feel what that feels like to be them, a really fantastic skill, whether you're a sales professional getting started out, a sales leader, or any other kind of leader for that matter. You got to be able to understand people. And it all starts with empathy. Mike, my next question, would you be willing to tell our audience about what you're doing right now these days to raise the level of your leadership game?
Yeah, everything is at your fingertips. There's no shortage of content or podcasts or anything like that. This is a great example of it, this podcast right now. Of if you can listen to this thing and learn from the leaders that you're bringing on here, that's going to raise the level of your leadership. Focusing on what the task is at hand and taking the time out of your day to spend on developing a skill and educating yourself. That's one of the things that I try to instill in my team and try to take myself very seriously. So carving out time to learn. If you don't know, Google it. And if Google doesn't get you where you're going, reach out to other people who seem like they might have a good experience in what you're trying to accomplish and network with them. It's another thing that I try to coach my team on is, I don't live their day to day. I have lived the day to day, but not in this world doing that exact thing. So there are other people out there that do that, and you should start relationships with those people. So networking and talking to other people in the sphere and adjacent industries, I wouldn't, I'd be performing at a fraction of the level that I could if I wasn't constantly calling people who don't do my job, but have done similar things and asking them for their perspective and what they've seen out there and using that.
What a terrific idea. I just think that's some fantastic advice, Mike. The truth is that people who invest in themselves to get better, 99% of the time, they do, in fact, get better rather than worse. So it's a brilliant investment. And I love the idea of you investing in yourself to just continue to get closer and closer to your ultimate potential. And you threw out a couple of really fantastic ideas, right? Do some research, talk to some other people and gain their perspectives. And networking is very, very misunderstood technique to grow yourself. A lot of people think it's just a way to go find new prospects or new leads or what have you. I've found that it's a great way to find allies who like the same things you like and are interested in the same things you're interested in. And they can become really terrific coaches and mentors for you as you grow your career.
Yeah, I'll give you even a concrete example. So we invested, one of the first things I did when I got here at ArcSite is I invested in a conversational intelligence platform, basically a coaching tool that we would look at recorded calls, we'd mark them up, share it with the team, other people could learn from it and more. And as I was developing the game plan, one of the leaders at the organization that we bought this from, he said, "Hey, you guys are in this really interesting space. I have another company that is a customer of ours. You might be interested in talking to them." So we're a mobile CAD platform and sales proposal platform. This other company is a CRM platform in our same industry.
Mm-hmm.
So he set up a call between me and the sales director over at that company. And from that call, I changed 3 or 4 things as far as how we were approaching our business, pricing wise, and the conversation about pricing inspired from that conversation. And so far this year, in the 3 months since I had that conversation in December of last year, we've almost tripled our average price, our average sale price.
Nice.
So the person who I talked to had lived the exact experience. They're, a year
Right.
ago, they were in the exact revenue amount, struggling the same way. I said, how did you do it? They told me. I, took some of it. I edited some of it and modified our approach, and it's paying dividends. And I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't had the conversation with somebody else who wasn't doing what I'm doing.
That is a fantastic example. The synergy between you and that other company must have happened very quickly. What's made you invest so much time and energy in your develop leadership greatness in other people, Mike?
I've had the unique experience in my career to be really fortunate at an early age of the companies that I was involved with. So one of them obviously being Compellent, where we had a really special company, a really special group of people. And that was a badge that I've worn on my chest since the beginning of that. That badge takes you a long ways because it shows what you've been through and a level of tenacity and spirit and culture that comes along with that. So I've been fortunate that a lot of people have passed things to me and given me opportunities that I didn't have that first lucky chance. And I'm trying to pay it forward to the people that I can, that join my team and identify out there that have that potential, and watching them grow. And, selfishly, again, I want to work for people that get it and are going to go great places. So I'm trying to breed the next generation of leaders so that I can join them someday.
I love it. Investing in others, paying it forward. It's very gratifying work, isn't it, Mike?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
At what point in your life, Mike, did you become interested in leadership? How did you come to be involved in developing leaders?
I'd say the point I decided that I wanted to be a leader was when I became a father and realized, when you become a parent, you have this realization that you have a responsibility to, no matter how good you had it, to do better for the next generation, because the next generation is, that legacy that's going to carry the ball forward. And if you're not a parent either, right, you have this time here to put balls into play that are going to make the rest of the experience of humankind better. And I decided that the best way to develop the skills that I would need to serve my kids the best and to serve the next generation the best would be to get into a leadership role and really figure out what's going on there. It's one thing to look at great leaders and just think, oh, it's all natural. It's all that they were just born this way and that's how they are. It's a completely different thing to look at it as a skill that you develop and need to work on and hone and put a lot of energy and mind effort into. Right around the time, it was probably 6 months from when my son was born, that I decided that now's the time to start stepping it up and figuring out how to do it.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Mike. And obviously it's going well. Your career is on a fantastic trajectory. And I think it's wonderful that you're so focused on setting a great example for your kids. You and I have both been fortunate to have been exposed early in our careers to some really fantastic leaders who didn't have to take an interest in us, right? They just didn't have to. But they made the choice to make us a priority, and they made investments in us. And I think that generosity sets a just a terrific example. And oftentimes it'll inspire people like you and I to pick up the mantle of leadership and do what they did, keep an eye out for the potential in the young people that we're bringing into our organizations and make some investments in them. And sometimes those investments deliver an unbelievable, staggering return on investment. I suspect you're going to develop an awful lot of leaders during your career.
That's the goal.
I'm interested in learning more about how you transitioned from being a player to a coach as you were developing into a leader. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So I was at a startup in the software space and doing a partner development role. And what often happens, as you probably know, is they say, hey, we like what you're doing there. Make everybody else do how you do it. Like make a bunch of yous and do this thing. And also you don't have, you need to keep doing what you're doing at the same time. So it's that transition from player coach or from player to coach, but you have the player coach in between. That's the name of the game a lot of times in the smaller organizations, which we were. So, for me, it was starting to invest in myself by listening to podcasts, by reading books, and making a concentrated effort to carve out time on my calendar to start to figure out how to lead a team, and inspire them to be the best thems that they could be rather than just copies of myself. And that took a little bit because my initial instinct was, here's everything I do this now. And, it's a painful experience to go through of, why is this not working? What don't they get? What am I missing here? And that last question of what am I missing? That's where I started to realize that leadership isn't what I thought it was.
Fantastic. So many people are highly successful as a player, right? An individual contributor in their business roles. And that's what gets you promoted into your first shot at becoming a coach, right? Becoming a leader, becoming a manager. And sometimes you don't get the promotion instantly where you get to leave your individual contributor job and, get new business cards and a new office and start your new job as a manager or a leader. Sometimes you've got to go through that transitional phase where you're kind of wearing two hats now. And sometimes it leads to frustration for emerging leaders. But I'm here to tell you, folks, it's the greatest opportunity of all time. It's challenging as all get out. There's no doubt about it. But when you make that transition, just stick to your instincts and your values. And like Mike suggested, right, do your homework, do a little bit of research, get educated a little bit on management and leadership. And if you get outside of your comfort zone every day and try some new things, most of them are going to work out just fine. And you're going to bring honor to yourself and you're going to bring honor to your team in the long run. Mike, what's the greatest leadership advice anybody has ever given to you?
A couple quotes come to mind, but the one that's most impactful to me on a daily basis is, this idea that the behavior is not the problem. The behavior is a symptom of the problem. And that ties into the empathy that we talked about earlier.
Do you remember by chance who happened to share that the behavior is not the problem? It's just a symptom of the problem? Who shared that wisdom with you? Or did you discover it yourself?
Yeah, I think I heard it from an MMA fighter on a podcast once.
Okay. It's amazing to me how often people get focused on somebody's behavior and make this quantum leap forward and assume that because the behavior isn't what we want, that the person's character is broken in some way. And they kind of miss entirely the fact that that person might be in a really challenging situation that nobody should ever be faced with, right? Hence, the symptom is probably what we're looking at rather than the real problem. Maybe somebody's just being abused or taken advantage of or what have you. Great leadership advice, Mike. I'm interested in whether you have a 60-second leadership lesson that you'd like to share with our emerging leader listeners.
I would say consistency over intensity. One way to think about it is if you can only do one push-up now, or if you're comfortable doing 5 push-ups now, then do 1 or 5 today. Feel good about it and let that energize you a little bit. And tomorrow, do the same thing. And the next day, do the same thing. And eventually, over time, that consistency of building your muscles will allow you, because you're going to, week over week, you'll be doing more volume of total push-ups. You'll build strength faster and better than you would if you were just focusing on just killing yourself every 3 days. It's the same thing with sales leadership, right? Don't focus on beating up the team one day and everybody's, whatever. And so you don't want to, have the hard conversation the next day because you were too intense yesterday. Be consistent.
Right. Well, that's terrific advice. Being consistent is something that is so important in business leadership, and it gets overlooked so very frequently.
What is it they say? Something like you need 10 or 12 positive things to overcome one negative thing.
Right, right.
So if you're being a jerk, right, that's just not one day being a jerk. You're ruining those last 20 days by showing your inconsistency.
We would agree. Mike, I know you're well versed about emotional intelligence, as you recommended a book on the top earlier in today's show. It would seem to me that you place a pretty high value on emotional intelligence. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
So does emotional intelligence come into play when you're recruiting new associates or developing new leaders on your leadership team?
It does, but I don't fault folks for not having it.
Okay.
If I look at myself, 10, 15 years ago, would I hire me to be doing the same thing? I don't know. A lot of people made a lot of investments in me to get me to where I am today. So, situational awareness varies depending on the individual. Emotional intelligence varies depending on the individual, but it's a culmination of their experiences. It's like we're back to Spicy McChicken sandwich, where the default option is something already. If I'm not putting the Spicy McChicken sandwich out there, the question is, if I do put the Spicy McChicken sandwich out there, will you bite it? Can it be taught? Can you start looking at that?
Well, you and I agree on a lot about emotional intelligence, Mike. I'm 100% convinced that emotional intelligence can indeed be learned and certainly can be taught. And maybe most importantly, I think it provides one of the most astonishing returns on investment for any business professional wise enough to study it and go to work on their own emotional maturity. If your emotional intelligence isn't as great as it should be, you can fix that. And it's relatively easy to do it. The book that you recommended earlier is a great way to do it. What do you try to teach your emerging leaders when they become a part of your team at ArcSite?
3 primary things. So one is behave like you want others to act, or lead by example. That's an easy one. So 2 would be hold yourself accountable, and take blame and credit where it's due. And then 3 would be don't take things personally. And I think that, it comes back to the emotional intelligence and situational awareness that, not everybody is doing the things that they're doing because they are specifically trying to attack you or make you look like a failure or anything like that. And when you first start as a leader, it can feel like that. But the more you do it, the more experience you gain, the more you realize that people are living their lives and their lives aren't your lives. And we all have a goal and we all have a job to do. And the real question is, how do we work together on getting there the best way that we all can?
Some wonderful lessons for emerging leaders there, Mike. I hope you were paying close attention to that one, listeners. Well, thank you, Mike Petroskey, for your contribution to our program today. We appreciate it. If anyone in our audience wants to contact your company about your offerings and become your next ArcSite customer, what's the best way for them to reach you or your team?
Go to ArcSiteApp.com, ArcSiteApp.com. You can find out more about our solutions there. We're on LinkedIn. We're on all the social medias. So hit us up. We're happy to talk to you.
That's fantastic. Mike, thanks again for being on our show today and for sharing your story with us. We appreciate it very much. Well, that's our episode for today. What are you doing, listeners? We want to thank our special guest, Mike Petroskey, the Vice President of Sales for ArcSite, the Michigan company that delivers a fantastic virtual sales estimation and drawing tool that helps companies to win more of their business bids and to look impressive against their competition. Our next episode will be released in a week, and we're excited to announce that our next show will feature another amazing leader who will share their leadership best practices with you. Thanks again, listeners, for joining us today, and please reach out to us at info@michaelbeachcoach.com to give us your feedback about today's episode with Mike Petroskey, or to share your suggestions with us for a future guest, or to help us make our podcast even more valuable to you as you invest in leadership development. We'll look forward to spending our next episode together with you. Until then, remember, you should probably prioritize consistency over intensity, as Mike Petroskey recommends. Be the person your team expects you to be, and be that person every day without fail. See you next time on What Are You Doing?, the podcast for people who are investing in leadership and the people who want to become the next generation of leaders for their company. See you next time.